So I'll start with the first slide. Again, I'm the jingle guy, right? For Forrest Gump or whatever. But remember that commercial? I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere. I've been everywhere. I mean, I try to get everywhere, when it comes to colleges. And I can't tell you the number. I got to put them in an Excel spreadsheet. And I can just go down and write and tell me how many, right, through the count. But no, I've been so many places, and I make it. I'm going to bring up my wife again. You knew I had to bring her up. But what she learned early on, when she tried to pry me from my seat in my office to go on a vacation, that I really wasn't wanting to go anywhere. And her negotiation was, you get to pick the place. And I'd always pick a place where there were university libraries, and I had a library day, and I had these things set aside. That was the only way she'd get me to go. So she got smart, and she would say, okay, we got to go on vacation, whatever. She said, so here's your options. I checked out the places already, and they've got this and they've got that. So she knew what she had to do. I say, so I've been all over the place because I get to pick where I want to go and visit different places. And so the next slide really kind of speaks to that. And this is just a tiny list. This is an Oberlin list. I got the Oberlin person there. This is a list that I did a little talk for Oberlin College for the genealogy group. And this is a talk I gave called The Magical Journey. And this was something I compiled way back when I was I was hitting it. And so I was going all these different places. So I said, these are the places I've been in a 2-year span that I remember that I was at this stuff. And so every place, like I said, right, had its own personality, its own vibe. And so like I can look at this list and say, okay, I can know North Carolina State University, love it. But I can't get anything, I can't use their databases. Right. So I know the different things because they won't let me on their databases at all. But North Carolina Central, I could show you a picture of me by a sign where they have this thing where it's like 4 visitors, and they give you a visitor thing, and then they put you in, there's a whole bank of computers for you to use at their library or their database. So you have to go. And so whenever I go places, you have to scope it out initially online. Remember I said library websites, you have to check out the places and see what you can actually look at in that particular place. Or if not, you're going to be disappointed because they're all not the same. And so I look on here, I say, I get fond memories of some of these places and others, not so much, as far as giving me the whole package. But I'm not a student there, and then you get what you can take and stuff. But that's one. And then these are just recent library visits. Again, my wife was in Raleigh, and she was doing some training and stuff. And she was there for a couple of weeks. I said, I can go to Raleigh, but it wasn't to see her. Of course, it was to get to a couple of these libraries. And so every place you see there really is a vacation. I went up through Fayetteville when I went to see her at that particular time. Auburn, and I'm missing one. I left Emory University off of there. When I went to the Asala conference, that finally started again, it was in Montgomery. And so I planned the route. I said, okay, I'm going to stop. I want to stop at Emory University. And I was at Auburn University. We went up to DC area. That's where Norfolk came in. She wanted to go to Orlando. I said, no problem. University of Central Florida has a place. So that's how you can tell everything I hear. And every time I go, it's a different adventure. And I find really, really interesting things. And it's because I understand, I realize this. And this is something I say, academic libraries are so essential to what we do. It just has to be part of it. Again, remember I talked about the scale. It has to balance. Both have to be there. And so here is, like I said, it's where that collective expertise resides. It's where all those scholars and all that information is sitting there waiting for you in one place. And so I talked about this in my toolbox course. And what I say is that it is the source of established knowledge. That's what they do. They teach that knowledge. They write their theses and dissertations, and most places are research libraries and stuff where they do research and learn more and write more. They're writing all the time. And so you go there, and then it's the new scholarship. Everything's new. There's always somebody writing a new article or doing something else. So it's a place where the knowledge is established as being credible, and you can go back and there's always going to be something new there. There's a guy that some of you may recognize him, depending on what television shows you watch or TV or cable or whatever. But this guy wrote a book Tom Nichols, and he wrote a book before this. I can't think of the name of the book, but it was a really good book too. But he wrote this one several years ago called The Death of Expertise. And he kind of agrees with what I'm saying, because what he said about the book, in the book, he said, oftentimes younger people and others will say, well, the internet is just a big library. I say, that's wrong. He says, the internet is a big dumpster. There's no guarantee that anything you find on it is true. And again, so it's like vetting these places and going to these secure places that have really good information and information you need, and knowing that you can trust that. But I know that people really get, I can encourage you, you know, like a parent that tries to encourage a child to pet the dog, but they're petrified, whatever. So I can, you know, it might look like kind of like a good idea until you get too close to them and they see them teeth, you know, they're like, oh, I don't think I want to do that or whatever. So you really have to try to sugarcoat it as much as possible, like taking medicine, you know, kind of make it really, really palatable. Say, okay, you know, don't be scared of these university libraries. They really are not the boogeyman. They really are easy to deal with. And I'm not the person that came out of academia where it's like, you know, saying that, but then, you know, it's because I got my PhD and whatever. I ain't got PhD, nothing, okay? I don't have anything like that. But I understand the value. And so I said, I'm going to start doing this. And I've been doing it for almost 40 years. But the last 5 years, somewhere around that time, I came across this book. And this opened everything up. Because what do we say? You don't know what you don't know. Yeah. I knew a lot when I went into the library because I was learning as I go. But I never had that formal training. And so I really didn't know what I was missing. And I left so much on the table, so to speak, right? And so it makes so much sense. I'm a military guy. I was in the Army for field artillery for 3.5 years. And so that's why I put here, a compass is the orienteering, as Thomas Mann's book is the library research, because they set us out when we had to, as officer training, you know, they gave us a compass and the map. And we had to do land navigation several times, and we had to get from point A to point B, and we had to get there within a certain time to qualify. You know, not we had to do it again, that type of thing. So it's like anything about you need some kind of a guide. And this book is absolutely excellent. It's Thomas Mann's book. It's called The Oxford Guide to Library Research. It's the fourth edition. The fourth edition is probably around $25. It's worth every penny to get it because of the way, what it does for you. Okay, we're going to go through that. What it is that thing that takes away your fear, emboldens you, gets you excited about the things you can do in a university library to bolster your research and your research success. So I call it the ultimate guide. It really is. It's guaranteed to make your library experience more fruitful. And I don't use that word lightly, because it provides this valuable insight. Again, stuff that you didn't really know that you're like, wow, I had no idea that is even the case for every case. It discusses this wide range of search strategies. Remember, I was talking about strategies and how I come up with stuff. Well, this guy had been doing it for so long, he came up with his own set of strategies, right, for dealing with and doing library research and stuff. So he has these search library strategies for how to use the library catalog and the database. Now, I want to point out, it says library catalog and databases. You might remember back when I was talking about those 3 areas, and one of the areas was library websites and how they're making them so much better with live guides and all that kind of stuff. So here, so you don't even have to go there to take advantage of that with the book. You can use his book and leverage that to get the most you can get out of just by being at your home and using the library catalog. And those library catalogs, I don't know how many people have been on a library catalog recently. Recently. Okay, and I'm not surprised. But when you go on those, if you've been doing it on a regular basis, because it's your job or whatever, evolution is it's just amazing what technology and what they're putting in place. There's something called, and I was doing this before I even knew what the official word. Thomas Mann told me what the official word was. But again, as I was learning by myself, there's something that's called focused browsing. And I didn't know, I was doing it, because I was finding great books and things, because when I got a call number, and it was F185, blah, blah, whatever, and then I went to that thing, the normal thing you do, most of the time people, they have blinders on, that's the book I want, I got 6 books I want to get. But he says the system's kind of broken in a way, it can't be perfect. So what the Library of Congress and the classification systems do is they basically group like books together. So if you found that book and said, oh, I like that book, chances are to the right or the left of that book, you're going to like that book too. So just like the census goes so many pages down, so many pages, it's that strategy. Whenever you're in the library, you want to go and look down this way and look down that way. But this is what some of the libraries do. The University of North Carolina, Wilmington does it. I was very thrilled. They've automated that. So now when you say, put in a book and I'm looking for this book or whatever, it's going to give you that book, and then it's going to give you like a link or thing down at the bottom. If you click on it, it's going to basically, like Amazon, whatever. If you like this, you will really like this too. That's what they do in the library world now. Yeah. So you can go a book on military or whatever you're interested in, and then you can end up going down to the left or right several books and see exactly what's on the shelf to the right or left. And so now when I go to the library itself, I inevitably come back with, I might have a list of 8 books or whatever, and I'll double that by the time I come back to where I'm sitting, because I've done that focused browsing to the left or right. And that stuff didn't exist 3-4 years ago. I never saw it. I was just shocked the first time when it popped up and said, ooh, would you like to look at these books? And I just clicked one thing and it did it. So it's amazing. So that's the kind of stuff that he teaches you and talks about in his book.
He was doing that. I was doing that years ago, when you go and look for one book and in a section, and then you just look to see what all inside it.
Because you lost.
Yeah, I know. They put on, if I was looking for one book, all the cookbooks
see, that was,
right there.
Yeah,
so I just looked at all of them, and I leave about 5 or 6 of them. But
I was so focused. That's the way I was, just focused. For me, it was speed. Get this book, get this book, get this book. And I never really thought much about that. It's very logical, but I just never thought about it. And I think if I didn't think about it, how many other people just never really thought about it? But right, people think differently as far as how they attack problems and question stuff. So it doesn't surprise me that that's what you would do. But boy, when I got converted, I mean, I saw that it was really, really. And this is what's great about this book too, is it is a reference book. It is a book to learn, at your leisure, sit down, read several pages or whatever. But it's not the kind of book you want to read from cover to cover. I can't do it. You can't do it because it's not a great novel. It's not Isabel Wilkerson's Warmth of Other Sun. You can't read it that way. What I go through, what I learn is I'll look at a certain thing. So I'm going to learn this today. I'm going to read this or whatever. And so I'll just go through the table of contents and I'll just pick stuff and I'll just start reading. And I don't have to read a whole lot. We pack so much into a page that I'll end up learning things that I can then turn around and use the next time I go to the library. So yeah, you don't want to get it and say, okay, I'm gonna force myself to do this. You don't have to do that. If that makes sense. So Thomas Mann, the reason the guy knows so much is he was a general reference librarian in the main reading room of the Library of Congress for 30 years. Over 30 years. You think that man ain't seen a whole bunch of stuff, and you see it in the book too. He talks about these different things. And I got to tell you, when I went to the Library of Congress after I discovered this book, and I went there and I was like, you guys see Thomas Mann? I wanted to see him. And so I went in there and they laughed because they said, that's one of the most, people come in and they laughed at me because I was holding Thomas Mann's book. And so they're like, here's another one. Because that book is so revered, so many people are benefiting from it. They come to the library and they got it in their hand. Mine has so many of those little bookmark things in it or whatever. I think you got an extra kick out of me because there's all these different things in there or whatever. And you're like, okay, there's another Thomas Mann convert. But it was just the thing that they just knew it because he had written such a great book and a great service to the community. Like myself, like I said, talk about writing this. I really want to write that coal mining book, but I got all this knowledge and sit there, talk about it, and I just spout out all this stuff. But if I don't get that written, like he wrote this book, it's really going to be really a sad day. I really need to try to get that written because I'm the only one really that can write that and have done all that work. And it's really be a shame. So I got to do it one day. I'm going to really try to do it. I just turned 65, so hopefully I got a couple of years left. But this is what the former president of New York Public Library said. He said, this is an insightful, timely work, deserves a place in every researcher's toolkit. So he stole my word, but that's okay. Researcher's toolkit. But right, it's affirming to me, that's what you do. You build this toolkit of information, of knowledge, so that when you need it, it's going to be at your ready for you. Now, did you know this? In the current PDF edition of the Library of Congress subject headings that we search on pretty much, there's 13 pages of phrases starting with African-American or African-Americans. That's a lot of pages. That's a lot of pages. And they keep revising that from time to time and whatever. And this book was from 2015. And so it's the kind of stuff that's in there in a way of searching that you just don't really think about. Did you know this? Dissertations are a true gold mine of scholarship in all subject areas. But contrary to a widespread assumption, the vast majority of them do not wind up as published books. So it's this untapped. So you got these people, anybody wrote a thesis or dissertation? So I ain't put my hand up either because I didn't either. But the work, I've been around people that are doing their PhD, like, okay, don't jump out, jump off the building. It's so much work. It's such a long period of time. It's very focused and specific. They go through a team, they got this team that works with them. They have their dissertation team with professors and whatever that guide them through. They get to pick a topic and then they have to focus and find stuff. It's really very focused, whatever their topics are. So can you imagine? I mean, in my mind, it's like every one of those dissertations or theses, if it has to do with African-American historical stuff, they spent months, if not years, focusing in on one particular topic. And now all this information is available to you in a book that's sitting on a shelf back in the day. And most people don't touch it because that person did not take it further like so many other of his peers and make it into an actual book that does end up on the shelf, right? In most cases. So that's like the counter thing. And I was very, very surprised. So I get very excited when it comes to that particular thing, because I know there's so much out there. And that's one of my favorite areas is thesis and dissertation. And then the last, did you know here, is that the Library of Congress alone of all libraries in the world own a virtually complete set of American doctoral dissertations, but not master theses, on microfilm and microfiche. So again, I say if you want to go and search somewhere, that's where you search, because they pretty much, you can go to this library, that library, whatever, but university or this university, but they got all of them pretty much all in one place that you can. So when you plan that big research trip there, as you look and find dissertations that are available, you can just go right there and look at them at the Library of Congress all in one place. Or you can do what? You probably could do interlibrary loan if they're on microfilm, right, from someplace, most likely. But I'm so crazy about theses and dissertations that I started doing this. I've been able to keep this up for I don't know how many years now, but I do a weekly post. I do a weekly Instagram post. Don't ask me anything else about Instagram other than trying to post this thing. You go on that site, you don't find a whole bunch of anything else. But this is what I've done. I was so enamored with these theses and dissertation related to African-American. Remember I said all this stuff that I told my wife is both of us, it's a box set. If you go on movie down to Wilmington, you got to take all of my stuff. I was finding all these different things in places, theses, dissertations, all this stuff. And so when I looked through, I just started compiling. I'd go through and I'd find stuff. And then what did I use? Excel spreadsheet. And I just kept track of all of those. And so I have in reserve probably now maybe about 25 theses or dissertations that I have at the ready for the next Wednesday when I got a post. And I'm always replenishing that. But I haven't even hit the tip of the iceberg, I'm sure, as far as these things. But you can go out there and you can go to the website, and it's at Pinnick AA Books, AA Books, and you can just see, it'll blow you away, the different theses and dissertations and the topics that they choose. When I say they're narrow, I mean they are narrow lots of times. And so, particular county in Texas and so you're going to really be able to find a lot of these things. And then you can get these when you go to university libraries, most of the time through ProQuest. ProQuest has the largest theses and dissertation over a million, 2 point something million dissertation and theses on the ProQuest website. But the good news is there's lots of, right now, what's great is that lots of entities are creating, they call them open dissertations or open spaces, where ProQuest, you got to go to a university library, you got to, hopefully, if they're not, North Carolina State, where you can't get on the databases, you got to find a place that has it to look for them. But there's lots of places now. So start looking when you do thesis dissertations, put open these dissertations or things like that to try to find places that have open ones where you can just download the whole thesis dissertation for free, because they're out there and there are many of them. So this is one of the things that they do. I think with African Americans and our history, we're talking about that. What this book does, I thought I knew where a microfilm was and whatever. I had no clue. But he directs you to all these different microfilm and microfiche collections, that books that you never knew existed. And it's just amazing when he does that. But he does it right in the book, and it's just something that is very important to African Americans, because think about the timing, when the 60s, when they were starting the African American programs and things like that, that was in the heyday of microfilm and microfiche. So they started collecting and making all these African American programs, because think about it, it was a new program in university libraries now, on library campus, in the departments. Now they had an African American studies. So they had to start doing all the research, and the people had to start selling, the companies that start selling packaging stuff. So they started microfilming and doing all that stuff, and they started selling all these things to the university. So you go to university libraries now, you see tons of microfilm cabinets full of all those different things. At half the time, you don't even know what they are. You don't know what they are, but he tells you what collections have been done and where they are. And the best news about it, I'm going to keep it quiet because I think it's a secret coming along here, what they've done with those collections, or what's happening with those collections now. Here's another area we talked about, JSTOR. He goes in and he tells you which journals exist, because again, you don't know what you don't know, and then which ones are electronically available. So maybe you can get them at home, or you can get them on a website like JSTOR, because he talks about JSTOR. You guys have probably never heard of Project Muse. That's kind of like the sister of JSTOR. If JSTOR doesn't have it, you go to Project Muse, because they'll probably have it. And that's another, they're competing websites or competing companies. But if one doesn't have it, you go to the other.
Are you saying Muse or Muse?
Muse, like your Muse, so MUSE. Project Muse is another one that you want to look at, because they have lots of material, and sometimes what JSTOR doesn't have, they'll have that range. JSTOR might stop at 1951, and then Project Muse will have it from there on up to 1980 or something like that. And then they tell you, more importantly, where they're indexed, so you can find this stuff and look for your people. Look for Hale County, Alabama, or wherever you're looking for. You can search that way. But these are the ones that when you go to university libraries, hundreds of thousands of dollars, they're investing in education. So hundreds of thousands of dollars they're paying to have these services in these libraries. It's a big business. It's a big business. And what you're looking at here are the three of the big guns. EBSCO-host, ProQuest, I call them the king of beasts, and Gale Cengage. They are the ones that are doing, they're the biggest commercial database companies, and they're information service providers, content providers. So they provide all this content to libraries to then provide to their faculty and to the students. And ProQuest, again, is the one that rises above the rest of them. One of my favorite areas, and I hope it becomes your favorite area, I think it will, because this is huge for me. When I started doing this research, the things I started coming across were these specialized encyclopedias and bibliographies and those types of things. And I remember in the day when the salesperson was coming by the house, right? We throwing them out now. We started throwing them out like in the last 10 years, cleaning out Andy's house or whatever, right? Just 24 volumes of African-American whatever from the 70s or whatnot, the stuff that they bought, and that was the cutting edge stuff. And my parents bought that stuff and it was in our house and whatever. So I remember the value of, having it all concentrated like that. But today, the stuff that they're producing is absolutely amazing. He spends a whole chapter talking about specialized encyclopedias. Take a check and look at what he is talking about and what's available there. A lot of it's online now where they're producing, again, they're producing things to save space. They're producing some of these new encyclopedias online, but some of them can opt to print in print format. But some of the detailed stuff, and I said a couple of samples here, The World of a Slave. And this other one is blacks in the West and beyond. America, Canada, and Mexico, selectively annotated bibliography. And when they talk about the West and beyond, that's why you have to read the preface. You have to read and say, what is this book actually all about? When you open up that book and start looking and say the West and beyond, you're thinking, what are you thinking? Way west of Mississippi or maybe Colorado or whatever. When they say West, they're talking about Ohio. I'm sorry, not that I say Ohio, no. Iowa, Missouri. And they're talking about these different places like they're the West. They're the West when it was the Gateway, the Gateway Arch or whatever. But this book has so much more in it than it seemed. The title's a little bit deceiving, but it's a great one. But it's all of these different, and that's why I find a lot of my theses and dissertations, the way they break their book down is they break the different categories. And one of the categories is theses and dissertations all by itself for the different states and stuff like that. So this is a thing that's happened recently that is really the biggest breakthrough in African-American research that I've seen since I've been doing this for a long time. And this is a product release called the History Vault. And ProQuest created this History Vault. And what they basically did is they opened the vault. They're so big, they went out, they were smart, they're very strategic. Remember I was talking about all this stuff from the 60s and all these microfilm cabinets and all this stuff that's out there? They went out and bought the rights to all of that. They went out and bought the rights. They bought out all these different companies and they bought the rights to all this rich African-American specific stuff. All this research that had been done over the years, decades, and they bought it all. And so they bought it and they sat on it because they didn't really know what they were going to do. They just knew they needed to purchase it before somebody else beat somebody else to it. So they bought it. And so they launched History Vault. They finally got around to saying, okay, let's make some money off of this. So they launched this in 2017. And so now they're converting this massive collection of historical microfilm and they're digitizing it and they're putting it into online modules. This is something you want to keep in front of you and pay attention to when they're talking about it. You're not going to see it in the general public or whatever. You're going to need to go to ProQuest site. You got a blog or whatever. You can just Google History Vault or whatever and keep track of what's happening and find where in your area the History Vault is. Okay, you want to find out where it is. Because what they did, again, they went and bought that stuff from the 60s, 70s, 80s, when it was really rocking and rolling with the African-American collections and with all microfilm, microfiche, that was the medium. And so they own all that stuff. Now they're converting it. And now they're creating that digital access, which really, again, all this stuff that you didn't even know existed, now it's in the place where we normally would go and look, which is online. And they have it all broken down. And it's absolutely fantastic. Here's what a professor said about History Vault. He said, ProQuest History Vault impresses me deeply. I use a lot of historical databases, but this one stands out as one of the best and most friendly, user-friendly I've encountered. There are still so many hidden histories that await the light of day and the curious eyes of young historians. And then I added that little emphasis, and we genealogists. Because that's exactly what, they're hidden histories that are just waiting. They've been buried for so long, people forgot about them. But our ancestors are all through these things in ways you really wouldn't think about because they did so many things that we just never really thought about that they did. Interacting with the federal government. A lot of stuff is federal government stuff, and it's the way they interacted with the federal government. And we talked about, and I talked about them being so defiant in their own way, standing for their rights, doing all these kinds of things. Well, they actually did it, and they did it by writing letters, protesting, with advocating for different things. And like I said, this they didn't wait for Martin Luther King. They were doing this well before that, and it's documented because all those letters, the federal government, they were keeping track and logging stuff in or whatever. So there will be people coming from all these different little tiny communities all across the United States that are complaining about the law says this, but you guys aren't doing it here. I'm filing a complaint letter or whatever. I say African-Americans were very, extremely smart, and they learned very quickly. And they had people that told them, hey, you can file a grievance, or you can do this, you can do that. So a lot of it's labor related. They work for these different industries, and then they put the white person ahead of them for a job, and they knew that they were the next one in line or whatever. They did it. And so that stuff got captured back and forth. So really, really wonderful stuff in here. So this really is a duplicate. This is saying the same thing pretty much, that they acquired all the collection as part of their history series. Like I say, and most of the stuff that they have, when you look at it, is going to be African-American specific. So here's the I really try to keep things simple because there's so much stuff and it gets so complicated, right? But I really try to keep it simple. And so what I ended up doing when I was going exploring and I was asking questions and stuff, I figured out as I went into these libraries that had all of these big, massive collections, the microfilm and whatever. Sometimes what they would have is they'd have at some point they did like we're talking about library guides. The librarians and people before, they actually made an attempt to look at some of that stuff and create a library guide, basically a guide of what's in these different collections. And so they did a really good job of doing that. On each microfilm reel, they would go through it and they say, okay, this is what's on this reel or whatever. Well, they did it for several things. In some libraries, you can find it, other places, they don't care much about this stuff or whatever. So when a new group comes in, they might throw that stuff away. That's not important or whatever. They just get rid of it. But lots of major libraries still have them. And in some cases, they digitize them. And so what you're looking at here are two. If you don't do anything else, look at these. These I'm going to put into that Google Drive also for you to look at. But these are just two examples of really rich African-American specific collections that are now part of History Vault. So when it says links to microfilm guides, they're digitized. I'm going to put them in your thing, and you'll be able to look at your house and see what you have. And if you get excited about something that you see because they mention your little community or whatever, then just know, because I told you so, that when you go to a place that has ProQuest History Vault, all you got to do is have that piece of paper or whatever, and says real whatever and stuff, and then have somebody walk you through or show you where it is, because it's tied to what they digitized. So this is the index. These will be the indexes to whatever History Vault has. So I've been having lots of success, and it's very exciting because I can find something and now I know, okay, next time I go to the library and go to History Vault, I can find that particular thing and I can download that whole document or report. Sometimes they're just massive reports. So these two things I said, I'm going to give them to you. You're going to be in that folder, and you just go ahead and look at them. And then you can report back and say, oh my goodness, I looked at some of this stuff and I just can't believe some of the things that are in here. But it's all African-American stuff, and it's multiple pages, like 40, 50, 60, 70 pages. So what we're going to talk about for the balance of this is what you're going to see when you walk into a university library. Here's the primary areas of opportunity. So we're talking about the anatomy of a library. These are the 8 areas that I say you need to pay attention to, and they have something for you that's related to African-American. The first one is the manuscript collection or special collections. That kind of varies. They call manuscripts some places like special collection, archives. It's a place usually where you may have to have you have to sign in. You may have to put everything you have to put it into a locker or something like that. So it's really a more controlled space. They have unique documents. And sometimes, in some instances, depending on what they're bringing out, you may have to have gloves on to look at this stuff. And it depends on the place, what their rules are. But I can tell you right now, wherever it is, they're going to have certain rules you have to go by. And my advice to you is don't wait until you get there to find out what the rules are, because it'll be right online, right on their website, and figure out what it is they need. One of the things I can tell you, no matter what, almost every place, they're going to want you to have pencils, because that's what they use, and they don't use anything else. And they want you, if you're writing or doing whatever, that you have pencils. So here's something that I found. I'm back at NYU. I'm back over at DeKalb again now. So here is something that I found in the NIU archives that again, stuff, you just don't know what you're gonna find till you go on and start looking at the finding aids and things. But I talked about Braidwood. This is the Will County Circuit Court, which covers Braidwood. And this is a subpoena from 1884, I believe. And so this guy by the name of Tucker Ballard, he murdered somebody. It's all about a woman. It's all about a woman. And he regretted that till the day he died, but they were fighting over a woman and he ended up killing this person. And they were in the coal mining community of Braidwood. So lots of people saw him do it. So he got convicted. He spent many, many years in jail. And so this is a subpoena. They arrested him. This is a subpoena for the people that, you know, people talking to go out in the community. Yeah, whatever, what they saw and stuff like that. And so they were prosecuting him. And so what you can see, what you can't see there, in the next slide, it'll be a little clearer, is these are the people that they subpoenaed, and he handed a subpoena to come and testify against this guy in court. Then there was another one, right, for his lawyer. So they sent another one too for the people that saw it the other way, right? It's a courtroom, two different things. And so you get a list of names on there too. But when you know a community, remember I talking about when you know a community, I said, and I know this African-American community of Braidwood, names were just jumping off of me as far as the ones that I knew. And one of them stuck in the middle. Remember that person we were just talking about that went down to Texas? All of a sudden, about the twins, he left the twins. He's on that second line. He's the second person there. You got, looks like Ella Ferguson. And then the next person you have, that's Jordan Johnson. That's Jordan Johnson. So I know he was there in 1890. So this is 1894. So again, your timeline, when you fill out the timeline, again, the more you can fill out that timeline, the more rich the story is going to be. This is a story because he had to go and testify, you know, here. And then I could see the other people. I think almost everybody except for like the last two people or whatever were African-American in this community. This was 1882. So what that tells me is that he was on the 1880 census. I knew he was still there. He didn't go somewhere else and then come back or whatever necessarily because he was there in 1882. But that's the kind of stuff you can find in there, is all this really rich stuff that you would think you had to go out to the courthouse to get. But it was not at the courthouse. It was in an archive.
Yeah. You said the second one on the second line is Jordan Johnson?
The second one on the second line is Jordan Johnson.
Okay, so I just found it interesting, if I'm looking at it correctly, that he spelled, is it George with a J?
Yes, he's Jordan, like Michael Jordan's last name.
Okay.
Yeah, he's like Michael Jordan's last name. So he's Jordan. Yeah, he's Jordan Johnson.
Oh, I thought you were saying Jordan. Sorry. Jordan.
Yeah, Jordan Johnson. And so online databases, I talked about online databases quite a bit a little while ago. But again, that's one of the most really, you get more bang for your buck. You get to find so much stuff. When I go, usually I have to spend, if I'm going to do online databases, I don't do anything else because there's so much out there. And a lot of them are African-American specific. And when you go out there and start using them, you just don't have time in a day. Even if you spend it with me, I spend 8 hours. I can spend 8 hours doing databases because so much stuff is in the databases. Let me give you a quick example when I say that. It's getting more and more crowded because the next article I'm going to write for Black Gen X is about ebooks. Ebooks are coming so prominent now so that lots of times when I be going out into the stacks looking for stuff, I'm finding it online. So it's online in the ebook. So when I'm doing so, I'm spending more time there because I'm looking at ebooks and stuff too. And a lot of those ebooks might be what I was salivating about a minute ago. Encyclopedias and bibliographies and that kind of stuff. And what's great about ebooks, and I don't know if you've ever, again, it's a new experience for me over the last couple of years. You can, when they pay for ebooks and you get access to it, you can download chapters and you can download huge chunks of the book. You can download the whole book in some instances. So it's really amazing what you can do and what you can take home with you on a flash drive with ebooks. And so you really spend a lot of time doing that kind of stuff. The library website, usually they have them listed alphabetically, A to Z, and sometimes by subject, as far as trying to find what databases they may have there when you go to the website. And like I say, not all libraries allow free access. Some may charge you, and then like North Carolina State University, they just don't let you use them at all. So this is the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. They got one of the most robust websites or databases around. They got over 1,000 databases. I'd love to see how much money how big the checks they're writing to these different information content providers. It's got to be a huge chunk of change to have that many databases, but they're committed obviously to that. And it's just what you can do is you can actually you can go to like this one and look, because they got so many that other places won't have. And you can almost kind of come up with your list of things that you are interested in and then find out where they are closer to you. Because over 1,000 something, they're going to have a lot of ones that you're really interested in that you may not find if you look at 2 or 3 that are local to you. Microfilm collection, we talked about it a little bit, but here, when you go to these libraries, they have collections, a lot of them. University of Illinois would be one, I would think Indiana University, lots of larger universities will have collections. There may be more than 10,000 reels in those collections, all these documents. So there's just a sea of microfilm reels. They consist largely of newspapers, some conference proceedings, some city directories and other stuff like that. And sometimes they don't really do a good job telling you what they have. So they got 10,000 things, but they don't have a library guide that really breaks down what they have. You have to actually go in to see what they have. And I've done that many times. I'll just go into a place and then I'll just start pulling the drawers open and I'll make my own chart of what they have in that library because I can't find it online. They have not made that a priority with the microfilm. What they're figuring out at some point, they say, oh, at some point we'll just go ahead and digitize it. So since it's taking the energy doing that, we're going to digitize it in a year or whatever anyway. That's pretty much what they probably were thinking. But a lot of these collections that I'm talking about, when you pull those drawers open, it tells you specifically it's African-American related. It's related to the African-American experience. So here's the place I've been talking about, NIU. That is, what you see there is newspaper row. All of that is newspapers, their collection that they have there. It's just amazing. So it's like an oasis of African-American newspapers. But most of it, I can't walk in there and they won't hand me something that says, here's all the newspapers that are in this collection. They have no idea and they're not going to take the time to do it. But I know pretty much what's there because I spent so much time there. And Northern Illinois University is not part of WorldCat. So even if they had quick stuff out there or whatever, you wouldn't be able to see it from a distance or whatever, at least through them. So periodicals, we had talked about them a little bit. What you need to know is that you don't really know what you want until you start looking. So like periodical, what's great about these big libraries is that they have these long runs where they might have a collection that started in 1911 or something like that. And so they have these long runs of these periodicals, and lots of them are state journals and stuff. They're all in one place. And so you'll be able to go there and get all of them. And what happens is you're not going to necessarily go there and just look through them or whatever, right? What you're going to do is you're going to find like these obscure journals because you're going to find a thesis or dissertation, or you're going to find a JSTOR article that's going to have all these different footnotes, probably 50, 60, 70 footnotes. And then you're going to find some footnotes that you really were interested in. It's going to be out of a journal. And so then that's what's going to lead you there. And then when you know they have so much, you're going to be able to go and get that article without having to have a lot of trouble. So if you have a big library that's close by, you can do that. The other thing that's really good news for you is that most libraries now, because of so much stuff being digitized and so much of their journals being delivered in digitized formats, lots of times they're able, if you ask them, they'll go ahead and look and grab it, and they'll actually send you articles a lot of times where you don't even have to do it. If you request it, I think do you guys have this article or that article or whatever? And they'll look at it, they have it in their collection because you don't even know where to look. They're looking, they find it, and they'll actually send it to you, they'll email it to you. And I've had that happen to me before. So you need to be aware of colleges moving their print collections off-site to remote storage, because that'll happen a lot of times. Again, they're making space. And so what they'll do is they'll move all that stuff to an off-site, so you have to request it. And so if you're not real careful about doing your homework ahead of time, you may go to a place where they say, well, we need a 24-hour notice. It's on our website or whatever. Some places, even though it's on-site or it's off-site, it really isn't technically off-site, and they're very efficient. And if you put in a request, they'll fill it within a couple hours or whatever. You're going to be there, they'll bring it and stuff, but you just don't know. So you really want to pay close attention to that. And the last bullet here is that a lot of the stuff that you see in all of the periodical collections, they're the ones I was talking about in this African-American scholars and that kind of stuff. They're the ones that are the pioneers We wrote that stuff from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And that's the stuff that's sitting there waiting for you is in these periodicals that were written. This is the guy, again, I didn't know him from Adam. I was in a library, I was walking down the shelf, looking at different stuff. I thought, oh, this looks interesting. It was called African-American Life in the Post-Emancipation South, 1861 and 1900. This guy's name was Don Neiman. I said, oh, this sounds really, really good. And it had like 12 volumes. And I said, this is great. And so I grabbed them. I went down and sat down, and I was just struck with, I couldn't believe what I had found. It's this huge collection of articles. So he kind of cherry picked and put together this based on topic. And so he went through and put together this collection on this topic. And he picked out the stuff. Again, when I started looking at the people who were the authors of these different collections, again, I knew their names because they were the ones that were writing the African-American articles and things in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so that's why I recognize many of the 12-volume set covers periods critical to African-American research, but we're talking about Reconstruction era and beyond. And so he talks about this. He covers the Civil War, the Reconstruction, and the Nadir. Here's samplings of the kind of stuff that they have. Again, it just blows your mind. Again, when I talk about specific type of stuff, this is what you're going to find when you're looking. The recruitment of colored troops in Kentucky, Maryland, and Missouri, 1863 to 1865. That's pretty narrow. And that tells you something that probably the way they recruited them in other states were kind of different, right? And that's absolutely true. If you know anything about the Civil War and the recruitment, not all the southern states, right? Not all the southern states succeeded. Lincoln was able to keep certain states, and they had, but he struck a deal with the devil for the most part, right? Kentucky's a good example of that. So with Kentucky, they stayed in the Union, but what they also did is they kept their slaves. So they kept their slaves. So when they're recruiting for colored troops and stuff, it was different from going into Tennessee and taking everybody because they're in rebellion. So you can just do whatever you want to do there. They couldn't recruit them in Kentucky the same way. In Kentucky and a few of these other states, they actually paid the slaveholders for the release of their slaves. They actually paid them for that. They paid them, they compensated them. And those records actually exist. That's where lots of people find who the slaveholder was, if it's in a state like Kentucky, because they had to, if they were going to release that slave, they were able to call slave compensations. And they were able to get compensated for those slaves to release them to go fight.
I got a question. I was doing some research. I have an ancestor that was in the Civil War in Tennessee. I have a document where after the Civil War was over and when he went home, he went to the commissioner's office and he filed for property that Confederate soldiers had taken. Now, my question is this. I still haven't found, I want to touch on when you said that that's a lot of times how you can find a slaveholder.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have not found anything pertaining to that yet. But what I do want to know is, in 1863, 1865, was around the area when he was in the military. Okay, when he came home, he filed a complaint to the commissioner's office for $250 for a stolen horse and a stolen soul. So does that mean that as a slave, he could have owned those previously? Or does that mean that it's a possibility he could have been a free person?
That's a very good question.
I've never found that out, and I've never found anyone that could really tell me whether or not. Now, I have had some of my friends to tell me that a slaveholder could give a slave anything he wanted to. Well, I kind of figured that. But for an ex-slave to go into the commissioner's office and file for something, that's just like if I went to the police station and filed for something. If I was a slave, well, what did I have in the beginning? for anyone to steal. You understand what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So how would do you have any idea how I could find out if that meant that he was a free person of color?
I think that what you end up doing is you state a question, right? And then try to go about answering that. So you kind of state that question. Was my ancestor a free person of color? Then what records do I look at to try to find the answer to that? And so then you go to the wiki or other places that have information on free people of color in certain states, specific states maybe, or whatever, to see what you can find out as far as that ancestor to answer that question. Just based on what you said, I'm leaning toward the fact that he probably was not, because he could have been, but the question then is how long had it been since he had been manumitted, right? And he had been free, because 1863, he should have been possibly, if he had been free for a while, then maybe why was he on the 1860 census? Right? He could have got manumitted in 1863, but I'm thinking the likelihood is probably, in my mind, I'm not going to go down that road first. I'm going to go down the other road. And the other road is when you say that, you talk about them owning stuff. Masters could do whatever they wanted with their slaves. The fact that they gave them stuff probably wasn't something that was real prevalent. They didn't tend to give them anything. Even the ones that became, that were their sons or daughters, that's a whole different thing. And even some of them, it depended on what they did, right? So all the situations were different as far as what they did, as far as that's concerned. Blacks owning, this is something that people don't quite understand as much. It's because it's hidden history.
Yeah.
Lots of blacks own stuff. Not property was a tough one, but they owned, when I say property, land was one thing, but owning horses or mules or some other kind of property like that was not really unusual, because lots of slaves were skilled slaves.
Well, they say that the two brothers were.
So if they were skilled slaves, lots of times they were able to drive bargains with the slaveholder. And they were allowed to, and this is the absolute truth, they were allowed to hire themselves out. So after hours, so after they've done the master's work, they could go to the neighbor and do work and get paid for that, and that money is theirs.
Okay.
There may be a contract where he says, well, you get 50% and I get 50%, but there was some kind of contract, but they were able to save up money. That's why in some cases you find slaves, formerly enslaved, that's how they achieved their freedom, because they were able to save up that money and then purchase their families. And so that's just one example of that. So I'm thinking that if I'm not surprised at all that he had a horse. And you see that through those records that slaves are going and saying, we had property that were taken by the Confederates, because then you could, if they proved they were loyal to the Union, then they could file those claims and get compensated, because the Union came through and they foraged off the land. They took whatever they wanted to take. Right. And so I would say you should feel that that he probably, what was his occupation? That's what I'd be looking, what his occupation was.
Blacksmith.
That would be, right? That's a very good skill to have. He's a skilled slave, and he probably was able to have money that he put away. And that's why I get the question sometimes too from people. They can't understand how their ancestor in 1870, when they emerged out of slavery on the census, how they have purchased property. And there's a couple different reasons how they can do that too, or get that. There's a couple different narratives, but one of them is they got the money. Okay. By the time it comes, they've got money saved up for a down payment or whatever to buy it because of that. So lots of people you see that are landowners after the Civil War, that's how they were able to do it, because they were able to earn their own money.
Okay, because it did say that, the, document was never filed. Even though he took it there, they did not file it, and you can see the old handwriting written down there. So I was wondering, if the people in the office felt like, well, he wasn't a free person before 1863, or maybe my ancestor thought that he had the right to file because the war was over and I'm home now and my property is gone. So I was sort of trying to put it together if it meant anything, but I got it now from what you're saying. I don't like upset you on that, because I've been researching this for about 5 years. But what I'm saying is, I think my ancestors thought that if in 1865, when freedom came, even though he was free, that he would have had a right to file for something that maybe, like you said, he had worked for when he was a slave, even though he was loaned out. Is that maybe probably the reason why it was never filed in the commission?
No. You may never know why. My thought would be, one of my initial thoughts might be, that was probably what the federal government, when the war was over, the Freedmen's Bureau, was there. They weren't everywhere though. And if they were further away, it might have been a problem with that, as far as him actually getting to the place where he needed to file it.
Virginia. I can't remember.
But if you look at a map,
Alexandria.
but if you look, okay, he's in Alexandria, then that's a possibility. If he was in Alexandria, that he would have been close to something. So that might not be what it is. Why he pulled back, to me, it really doesn't make logical sense in a way. I had to think about that. If it was his property, and probably everybody knew it was his property, there's no reason, right? There's no reason for somebody to come and try to intimidate him, right? And the local people to come intimidate him because he's filing that, because he's not filing against any of his white neighbors. He's filing against the federal government. He's filing against the federal government, right?
Yes.
Because they took his.
Speak through it away.
Huh?
On the bottom of it, it says it was never filed.
Right.
So what I felt like, it was like an application that, you fill out an application and when you walk out the door, they throw it away.
You really probably will never know that.
Okay.
I mean, really, it's a hard thing to prove. It's a hard thing to try to figure out. So you probably wouldn't know. I'll close with this. What I think you should do is, there's a guy. Oh, what is his name? I'll have to maybe email you. His name is David, and I can't think of his last name. He's an expert on the Freedmen's Bureau. And he's an expert on the Freedmen's Bureau. What you need now is, you're speculating kind of, and what you need to know is what the procedures of the Freedmen's Bureau was.
Okay.
Right? Where they were, what their procedures were, because when they got letters, there's a whole thing for the Freedmen's Bureau. Letters received, letters sent. Again, it's the federal government. They keep track. So when they said denied or whatever, there might be several other records that are in the National Archives somewhere, in a place that's what they do when somebody doesn't complete something, that may answer your question. And David would know that, because he knows that system, that bureaucratic system inside and out. David Patterson. He lives in Alabama. David would be the one I would reach out to. And actually, when I say David Patterson, reach out to him, you reach out to me, because I will have his email.
Okay, I'll do that.
And then I'll point you to him. And that's what he does. Okay. So the second one here is Black immobility and free labor, the Freedmen's Bureau and the relocation of Black labor. Again, that's when they were moving people around. Again, it's a part of that history that we don't know. And the more you understand where, and here they're probably going to be very specific with examples. They might mention Alexandria, Virginia, or Richmond, or whatever. And so when you're looking at this kind of stuff, you get a really good idea of exactly what was happening and the mechanisms for that. And whether your ancestors were in that, the relocation of Black labor. Because then you're wondering, because sometimes You find them in 1865 to 1868. You find them in 1870. They may very well be somewhere where they weren't earlier than that because they got moved. And so we make assumptions sometimes, oh, this is where they were in 1870. But that's why you need so much other evidence of like the kids and stuff. And okay, it says they're here, but to make sure based on other evidence that that's where they actually were when they were enslaved. They could be in some other place and not be enslaved.
Can I say this? I was stomped over that for a couple of years. And then I realized, like North Carolina and Tennessee, one time they called North Carolina and South Carolina, they called it the Carolinas. They designated whether it was North or South. And when my grandfather told me about his grandparents, that's the way he spoke about it. He said they came from Virginia through the Carolinas to Tennessee. And it really didn't make much sense to me when I was 13, the Carolinas, what the heck was that? I was just here in North Carolina, South Carolina. But then I found out after I started doing genealogy, exactly what you just said, they hadn't did the boundaries. And part of North Tennessee and North Carolina, did they divide that?
But I think that they might have called it the Carolinas, but I don't think by the Civil War, those boundaries were set. They were set already. Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure that.
The Civil War.
Because they're some of the earliest. They were part of the 13 colonies. So, right? Yeah. 13 colonies, both of them. So they would have already been set. In my mind, again, to answer that question, what I would think when he was talking about, again, when you're in a certain region and you talk a certain way, he could be talking about when they went down and they went to Tennessee. He could have been talking about maybe the route they took. If you look at them, now he's bringing a whole other thing like maps and that kind of stuff, and knowing so the question would be if a person was going from a certain place in Virginia to a certain place in Tennessee, what routes would they take? Because they weren't jumping on 64 or whatever. They had to go through the Cumberland Gap or different things. So that's why you have to figure out one of the things. If a person, he went from here to here, you'd have to figure out what were the possible routes. And he may have went through the Carolinas, both of them, because he may have taken that southern route. There might have been a northern route that we know of that goes through Asheville and it doesn't touch South Carolina. But I don't know. You'd have to look at the contemporary maps and see where the possible trails were and look at one that would come down through both of the Carolinas and then go up into Tennessee, in the particular part of Tennessee that you're talking about. And if it makes sense for him to go in that way, to go in that particular part of Tennessee, as opposed to coming in through the Asheville area, it would make more sense if that was closer, right? That's the kind of stuff you would have to do. One of the things you would do. Here, the transition of slaves from slave to free economy on a particular plantation. So again, you get to see firsthand what is going on when that slaveholder had to give up those slaves and now start paying them. Again, we know that, but we don't know what the mechanisms are. So these are the kind of things that are really helpful to give you some background on this. And if it says if you learn if this plantation was a smaller one, and then you knew your people were a smaller one, it's even more relevant, right? As far as what did that look like? I'll give you an example. Black-owned businesses, in the South, that's really an interesting one. The killing fields in the Deep South, the market for cotton and lynching of Blacks, very interesting too. And then the reconstructing Black families, perspectives from the Texas Freedmen's Bureau records and stuff. Actually, this is just a sampling of over 100 different essays and stuff through the 12 volume, all specified. So it's really, really good. You need to get a look at that if you can. Government documents. We've been talking about ProQuest. ProQuest is where most of the stuff is digitized now. The federal government is digitizing most of their material. Internet Archive, Trust, and that's where you're going to find a lot of stuff. The online databases and stuff, they're not sending out print stuff much at all anymore. So when you talk about government documents, most of the places you're looking for the material, whether it's old or new, is going to be online. And so that's when they have a whole different system of numbering stuff. It'll break your head. So what you do, again, what I would do if I'm talking about that is I would go to a subject area, like, again, the library guide, who's the expert on government documents. And that's the person I'd be asking specific questions about government document stuff and where they might be or where I would look. Because they would be able to answer it quite quickly because that's what they do. That's their area of expertise. But lots of this stuff, I find it because I can use ProQuest and it's just the way they got it all digitized. It's easy for me to find certain things. So that's why I say ProQuest for most of that kind of stuff. The reference stacks, I talked about the reference stacks a little bit earlier because of the fact that University of North Carolina and Wilmington had taken all their stuff. And so they can just wave a magic wand. I mean, they make a decision, they can make something that's reference, not reference anymore. But you typically don't see that. You see that it's set up just like a regular library, but they just have a huge selection. Like this one here at the University of Illinois. I mean, all of those books are reference books. And so in some libraries, they pull them together into a special area. And then there's, this you need to write them down, Greenwood Press. Greenwood Press is one of the major African-American related reference books. A lot of the different ones I talk about that are encyclopedias and subject bibliographies and all that kind of stuff, Greenwood Press specializes in that. So when you're going onto a website and you're looking, what you do when you're doing searches, because Thomas Mann will help you do that, he'll tell you about that. What you do, sometimes you just search on Greenwood Press, the results, that show me everything that Greenwood Press has. And then you might narrow it down from that, maybe African-American or whatever the other areas where you can do it. But that's the kind of thing you want to do and see what they have from Greenwood Press, because you'll get them all pretty much right there together. And you'll see there's really, really a lot of very, very helpful books that Greenwood Press published. The general stacks, again, just like a regular library, but it's just incredible, these large libraries. They just hold thousands of books related to history and social sciences and science and that kind of stuff. And a lot of those books are African-American related. Here's an example of the collection I was talking about, a collection where I was so pleased when I went into this place. Because again, what we're talking about, looking at numbers and call numbers and whatever. But here, they took their African-American collection. I ran across maybe 2 or 3 places that did this. They actually bought all of their collection together and they put it all in one place. So all the African-American stuff together. So they just pulled it all out together. Really nice.
And Allen County has that. Is that, I mean.
Allen County is what, yeah. Allen County is, and they have those guides that specific to African-American, telling you where to find the stuff. Allen County is really very, very unique in what they do. But yes, and these guys, and then what's the North Carolina Buford Library? What the Aggies? Who was that? The HBCU.
Is that Florida again?
No, it's the one that's in. Is it Greenville? Not Greenville, Greensboro. There's a library. I can't think of the name of they're the Aggies. I think is what their name is or whatever. But anyway, they have their collection. Last time I was there, but it's been several years. But they had their collection like this. They had pulled theirs together. I don't
How do you spell it?
The university?
No, it's the Al.
No, Aggies. I think their name on their team is
Yeah, that's Texas.
A&T.
Texas A&M, the Aggies name.
Okay, no, it's not. It's not them.
It's Florida, North Carolina.
No, it's in. It's going to be in Greensboro. It's in North Carolina.
The North Carolina A&T.
That's what it is.
What is it?
North Carolina A&T. North Carolina A&T has their collection like this too. They're in Greensboro. So theses and dissertations is the last section here of the 8. And I talked about them before. I think it's just terrific amounts of information. Because again, you couldn't come in there and say, I want to write on this particular topic. And then the person that's your thesis advisor in this team, no, because of their experience, they know that that's been written about already. And so they'll say, no, you can't do that or whatever. So all of these topics are really, in many cases, so unique because they want them, if they're going to get an advanced degree, they want them to be doing their own work, essentially, right? Not be doing the work of somebody else already wrote a thesis or dissertation on it. And these guys will know how to check that kind of stuff and whatever. So you really find lots of very amazing things as far as the topics. And so what you find now, though, is that it's almost all going digital. So it's all going digital. You very rarely will find anything that a university is putting out now that's in print. Most of them have all went to digital, which is good for us too, because then we talk about the open sourcing and that kind of stuff. So lots of times, lots of the dissertation, the person that's writing it has to get permission, but most of the time they do get permission. They've done all this work. They've done all this work. It's like, okay, now somebody can go out there and look at it and maybe, take some of their material or whatever, but they're writing it for the benefit of other people, for one thing. And the other thing is what they're trying to do. Think about it. They're getting their master's, they're getting their doctorate or whatever. They want to be known in the academic community. So lots of times they'll sign off on it going out to the open one. That means more eyeballs get on it, more prospective people if they want to be a professor. So it's really to their advantage. So lots of stuff that's coming out now is coming right online, right away from all these different institutions. And so a lot of it you can get and find, and it's not necessarily going to be on ProQuest because they're making it in the open thesis and dissertations places. So you've got really a lot of reasons, I would hope, for incorporating these university libraries into your research plans. I really think that is something that you want to at least dip your toe in the water when it comes to that. And by the time we meet again, hopefully you'll be talking about that you've been in the university library at some point. So, okay, I'm going to, you got a question?
Yeah, and this is probably going clear back to the beginning, but
Okay, it's okay.
connect me again with, okay, you say we've got our local public library card. But we need to have a university library card.
You want to try to get a university library card.
Okay, so now, is that just our local university library card? Are you saying all these places that we should try to look up information at different universities? Do we need to have a library card for all of these universities? I'm kind of confused now.
What you would want to do, use the scenario where you want to, if they're free. I've got a friend that's got like maybe 14 doggone cards, but she lives in Ohio, and Ohio is just so different. That's not the norm. I had at one point, I want to say 3 or 4. And one of them, because it depends on the library if they're going to grant you that or not. If they're going to give you a library card. And every system is different. So in my case, I was able to get in Northern Illinois because I was in that district. I was a tax-paying person in that area, and they were the library that was in my district. I was able to get one there. But again, I needed the public library card to know that I was a good guy to get their library card. The College of DuPage, it's a junior college. They had a very good library, and I used to go there because it was where I taught, where I coached track and field. And so I'd go teach track and field in DuPage County, and I'd go there when I come early to do research because I'm doing some kind of presentation or something. I was able to get that card because I worked in that county. So long as they saw the pay stub saying that I got paid by District 58, then they gave me that card. University of Illinois, I went down there. They gave me a card, and this was a great card. It was a card where I can go into stacks because they had closed stacks. I could roam wherever I wanted to. They gave me that card because I was a published author of a book. So see the 3 different scenarios. It depends on your area, but I took each one of them. You can see why I took the Illinois one. I snatched it up as quick as I could, right? Because each one's going to have advantages to you. And so you want to try to get as many as you can. But there's a method to your madness, right? You want them because they're going to lead you to more resources, stuff that you may not be able to get.
How are we supposed to go about getting them?
Yeah, like you're gonna write them.
Well,
Go to the library.
yeah, the libraries on their the libraries on their website will have what their rules are or whatever. When I was at one of the ones I put up there, when I was at, what was that, Tennessee? No, when I was at Fayetteville State. When I was at Fayetteville State, they had a brochure. In their brochure, Also UNC Greensboro, when I was there, they had a brochure, and both of them had brochures, and both of them had Friends of the Library. Well, Friends of the Library, anybody can, pretty much, you don't have to be a resident. So Friends of the Libraries usually will be almost anywhere. But what you have to do is read you have to decide whether if they want $10 or whether they want $30, you have to decide what am I getting for that? If they're only giving you, well, you can go from 4 books to 8 books and it's $15, you got to decide how much you're going to be going there and if it's worth it. So you have to weigh what it is, what the advantage is for each of the libraries to decide what you want. If it gets you access to databases or something like that, then you'd want to do it. Right? Because that's a huge one. And so if you can get that for $20 or whatever a year, you'd be crazy not to do it because it gives you so much of an advantage. And each library is going to be different. I heard that North Carolina, you pretty much can get library cards if you're a resident, you can get library cards anywhere to any of the libraries. But I don't think that's the truth. I think that's a false rumor, but I think I would know that. And I think enough people would have told me that to be the truth. So I don't think that's the truth.
Second question then, okay, so if there's certain things we have to do to be able to get a library card to universities, how much can we access university information online without cards?
Online, you typically cannot access their databases. And even when you go to the university, I'm using the University of Tennessee, for example, but when I went there, I didn't have access to anything. Or I didn't pay for anything when I was at the University of Tennessee. But University of Tennessee, and their rules were different. And they gave me access to certain databases as a visitor. So they knew in the system when I put that card in there and I had to log in or whatever, they knew what my status was. And certain databases that had rules against a visitor using them, they blocked me from those. But I knew it going there because I went out and looked and saw what their rules were. So I knew what it was when I got my wife to let us go that direction and me to go there. I knew when I went in what it was, what the deal was. So it's a case by case basis, and you really have to weigh it based on what benefits you're going to get from it.
Now regarding Allen County, you know what the rules are as far as a library card in Allen County?
I think typically Allen County is you do need to be a resident. I think you can you can go there in person and access the databases on site. But as far as their genealogy collection is all reference also. So it's a little bit different, but you can get a lot out of a research trip to ACPL, that's for sure. Because they have so many on-site databases and then their massive book collection. But yeah, I don't think that you can get a card for just regular checkouts if you're not a resident. Yeah.
And so I know my son, he works for Indiana University. I'm wondering maybe he could get a library card and that would give us access to all Indiana universities, right? Mm-hmm. Something like that.
Yeah.
I think
because the employees, I think, have access to that.
And again, you'll find out the rules when you look. And when you say to Indiana University, it made me think of, okay, I would definitely go there and look and see as an employee what his benefits are. If that's like a family plan, almost in a sense, right? Where you can, anybody in your family is entitled to this versus him. Yeah. Which then you're going to go around masquerading as him. Incognito.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I forgot to mention, my boss just mentioned you can't actually buy a plaque card. You can do that here in Kokomo as well. It's $65 for a year. And you could get one, but it sounds like if you're wanting to do genealogy, most of their books are reference anyway. But yeah, you can buy a plaque card, and that's like $65 a year.
Or you're saying for Allen County, or
yeah, if you wanted to get it for a specific library, I think it's good for all over the state.
For Indiana residents.
Yeah.
That, I mean, that's about the going rate, like even for ancestry.com or what, I mean, whatever. You have to know that that's.
What's that?
With the platform, you know,
Yeah, I mean, genealogy center, like pretty much everything up there is
Lock.
reference.
Right.
It doesn't leave. So yeah, but definitely worth going and visiting there, especially for the
But we
database.
couldn't get it to on our home computer. We still would
No.
have to go there.
Mhm.
No, they have, and it's very clear there. You have like free access stuff that they have. They have your free databases in the ones just, they really function like a university. They function separate from Allen County Library in theory, with all their stuff being pretty much referenced, like Matt said. And so
Dynamic.
it's not, you won't find an advantage. I'm hard pressed to think of an advantage you would have. I don't think the genealogy center has designed anything or agreed to anything to where they would accept payment for extra privileges or whatever when it came to that, because they don't let their books out. So that's off the table. And when they sign those agreements, when they pay all that money for those databases, certain databases, you just can't, they can only be used on site in that scenario. And even with students in certain places, they can only access certain database. Again, they sign certain contracts. ProQuest has certain rules or whatever, and the other one's EBSCO host. So it really boils. I'm so glad. I mean, you ask these questions, but what we're learning is it boils down to each individual. Like I was talking about Northern and the thing that they did there that other places don't do.
Yeah.
You just have to go and ask them on a case-by-case basis, and then that's when you will make a determination whether that's worthwhile to you. Because if you can get a card and it lets you get stuff from a place that even Allen is a couple hours away, you got to wait. How many times am I going to go there actually to take advantage of that?
Right, and I mean, my other thing, and I'm hearing that, and I'm going to ask this question, that familysearch.org, which is that Latter-day Saints again, is that something that you have to get from the library, or is that you can actually get that, can't you, on your home computer?
Yes.
It's completely free.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, you want to know those things you can do from home, because a lot of it you have to go, and especially looking at the academic databases are at the, you know, at these libraries and the universities. That's what we're really going to those places for, that academic information.
Right. Most of the databases that are of interest to the genealogy in general, and African-American genealogy, are these huge information content providers that charge hundreds of thousands of dollars for their databases. That's why the libraries can't afford them, and you have to go to the universities, but then the universities have their sets of rules.
Mhm.
But the difference is with Allen County is they've got a special dispensation or whatever with their county where they have stuff that universities have. So that's why it's worth it. And Matt was saying, it's my top priority about anything as far as things you should do, as far as trying to secure library cards or whatever. I'm like, if you're a couple hours away from Allen County, you need to start getting to Allen County.
Yeah.
But I don't recommend you run to Allen County and then say, I'm here. I recommend you go to Allen County's website and become very familiar with what they do. Because again, with all the stuff they have, and I'm gonna go back to St. Family Search, you're asking really good questions. But what we all have to do is you have to develop the knowledge of. So basically, like I'm talking about a research plan. You should have I'm looking at your little I'm trying to say a telephone book type thing, right? You need to have some kind of book or something where you keep track of your research and what you can do at different places or whatever. So you can, as you learn that, you can know, okay, yeah, this is a free site, this is whatever. And quickly you're going to learn those types of things.
Yeah.
But just as important as learning that Family Search is a free site, you need to learn the power of Family Search and what it can do for you. So when I mentioned, and you're going to go back and you're going to think about some of these things, you're probably going to email me, say, I want these slides or whatever. But Roots Tech, so now I'm coming to Roots Tech. You have to educate yourself on the things that are available. Back there, the things that you're talking about that you're interested in, you've got to go. The first thing I would do, the best advice I can give you is to go out there and find the people that's their area and they know about the slave commission thing. Because there's people out there that they're experts in that. They probably have done talks on it. And so whatever areas that you want to learn about, prioritize those things. And again, we're talking about free. I like free. Y'all know that. So y'all like free too. Roots Tech is amazing, but it starts next week. But again, what's wonderful about these is that you don't have to also go rearrange your schedule because you don't have to hear them live. Because you can hear them whenever you want on the free Family Search site. You can spend next week listening to stuff from 2022 and things that were there. So just be real strategic and be patient and just kind of really come up with a plan for what you want to find out and what you want to learn. But you always want to be moving forward with trying to learn stuff. Okay, hold on very real quick.
Okay. At our genealogy department, I think here, a few years ago, I was working with the Art Historical Society here, and we went down, and I don't know if this is still true or not, but I know we couldn't check out anything, but we could make copies. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then the copies were like 5 or 6.
Are you talking about the genealogy center?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can make copies there.
I have a question.
Okay.
Just, well, in December, I went on ahead and purchased the ancestry document, so I'm kind of looking at that a little bit. But also in that, the DNA testing. So once I get the DNA testing, can you guys help with that information? I know that you said Allen County has it where you could possibly set up an appointment, because I think I would need somebody to kind of help me out with
I would think so too.
reading that DNA testing, so I could call Allen County, but does our public library have people that can help us with that?
Yeah, we recently had a person who's a DNA expert. His name's Robert Slowinski. He lives in Rucheville. He's the only person that we have regularly that is a DNA expert. I mean, but yeah, we have classes from time to time. And that one, the one that was just a few months ago, that was a DNA question and answer specifically geared towards ancestry DNA test.
Can you give the spelling of Robert, but what's the last name?
Slowinski, S-L-I.
S.
W-I-N-S-K-I. But I mean, there's really nobody else that's necessarily an expert on DNA that's like on staff. I'm not an expert either.
I mean, so does he work there at all?
He doesn't work there. He's just done presentations, and he's done some presentations specifically. There are people on staff at the Allen County Public Library. I believe Sarah Allen.
Sarah Allen is the DNA.
Yeah, she is a DNA expert. And so she does a lot of different programs, and she does programs on a routine basis that are question and answer, or they're on a particular database like Ancestry. So she would be a good one that you could really seek out. But at our facility, there really isn't a resident expert, but we have programs from time to time with experts.
And another question. I mean, Indianapolis is a big city. That's even closer. Not to say that, I would have a problem going to Allen, but I mean, clearly Indianapolis, 45 minutes? Do we have any connections or anything with the Indianapolis Public Library or
as far as
regarding DNA, African-American, what we're speaking of right now?
We don't have any specific connection with Indianapolis. They're
Allen County.
we're not necessarily connected with them. It's just just not regional knowledge, being connected. Yeah, I mean, Indianapolis, I know they have really good genealogy department down there. And I mean, they have so many branches, but I think they have a pretty large genealogy center there as well.
I'm going to suggest that just sticking to DNA, what you will probably want to do, like I was talking to somebody the other day because we talked about the genealogy database software. I was talking about Roots Magic, and I'm going to start using Roots Magic more, and I want to know more about it and whatever. But I'm putting this project together, so I want to do some fancy stuff with it or whatever. Well, a friend of mine told me, she said, "Hey, I'm with a group in DC or in Virginia." She lives in Atlanta. Now we got all this Zoom stuff and whatever. She said, "I got a friend, or she said, I know somebody. There's a group in I think Alexandria, Virginia area." And she said, there's a guy there that's an expert. He leads the group for Roots Magic. So it's like a Roots Magic user group, right? And so she gave me his name and said, she's, "Oh, he's really friendly. He really knows his business and whatever." So that's the kind of networking you need to do is when you mention Indiana, or when you mention Indianapolis and Fort Wayne have African-American genealogy groups. Sometimes what those groups have are those special interest groups. So I would be trying to find out if the group down there, and they have an online presence, I try to find out to me, that would be one of the more natural ones, more comfortable ones where you're in a room, they meet maybe every third Wednesday or whatever, right? And so you can, and the only interest is answering DNA questions, working with you and whatever. So that would be something I would highly recommend. The other thing I would recommend with Allen County and with Sarah, I would recommend you don't necessarily contact her initially, because everything that Matt says is true. You go and you look, but he said she does all these different things, but everything she does gets recorded and is out there on their YouTube page. So Google Sarah Allen and look for the beginning, whatever, what do I do now? I took a DNA test. She's probably got 80 different DNA talks out there, and you can find several talks that match up with you, and then you can start learning that and seeing that stuff. And it works so much better when you contact her then and say, "Hey, hi, Sarah. I was recommended, I heard about you. I heard you're great in DNA, know whatever. I've watched, several of your videos, and now I'm at a point where I have a question or whatever." Right. And then I think that would be the best way to proceed.
Being about DNA, I mean, I'm going to get the information, and I know it's going to get here in a couple of days, but to actually understand, I'm sure I'm going to have some.
But I would do that. And I also think I would do, again, I keep coming back to Roots Magic, Roots Tech, and everything that Family Search has, because they specialize too in videos and Legacy Family Tree, again, I mentioned. Look and see what their schedule is of upcoming DNA, because you can click right on the DNA stuff and you can get a list of whatever's coming up. As long as you watch it within that 7-day window, you're good.